People pleasing is not kindness. It is absolutely 110% manipulation, and it makes you ugly. Not ugly in the way that you look, but it makes you ugly in your energy, ugly in how you have your relationships, and ugly in your personality. And people can tell. I hate to break it to you, but you're not as smart or as sneaky as you think you are. People that are aware of it, they're all clocking it, and it literally repels people out of your life. I first realized that I was people pleasing when I consistently was experiencing burnout with all of my relationships, or at least like 90% of them. I constantly wanted space. I was constantly pushing away. I was getting angry and resentful when my friends were just like texting me to say, hey. I was getting frustrated and like, why can't everybody leave me alone? And what I actually came to find out through a ton of self-introspection, working on myself and really coming to terms with a lot, I recognized that it actually had nothing to do with everyone else. And it was all about how I was conducting myself within relationships. I was so afraid that I would be abandoned by the very people that I wanted love from if I told them that I needed space or a break or more time to myself, or my life on a weekly basis needed to change, or if I needed less interaction. I was so petrified that I would be abandoned by every single person that was close to me. And this really brought out this people-pleasing tendency that I had. And it was when I kind of went through and surveyed all of that in my life, and I was like, why am I so miserable? Why do all my connections feel like this? Why do I feel like I don't want to socialize with anyone when I am such a social person? What is happening? I realized that I was people-pleasing through all of my relationships. I was people-pleasing. I was constantly agreeing to do things when I really didn't want to. I was constantly agreeing to get-togethers and meetups and conversations like week over week over week. And like I said, this wasn't just like with a single person. This was like even with my family. Every single time I would start to try to like make these little get-togethers and not taking control of my time, it led me to a slippery slope of burnout and upset. And then I would get really resentful because I felt like my time wasn't being respected. But the thing is, it had nothing to do with my time being respected. It had everything to do with I wasn't respecting my time. I wasn't respecting myself. And I was so terrified of the reactions I would get if I started that I would just people please. Now, I need to say for the remainder of this episode, I need to give everybody a little reframe. So I encourage you from this moment on, right now, okay, look me in the eyes. Right now, from this moment forward in your life, you are not going to call what you do, if you're somebody that people pleases, you are not going to call it people pleasing. You are from this moment forward going to refer to what you're doing as self-abandonment. Because that's actually what you're doing, is you're abandoning your own needs because you are trying to make sure, like basically it doesn't even make sense. It's like, I'm going to abandon what I need so that I do not become abandoned. It makes no sense when you really think about it. So I need you to start calling it self-abandonment, because if you are people-pleasing and you go, oh, haha, my people-pleasing is acting up, don't make it like it's not part of you and that it is not something that is absolutely detrimental. You need to be saying, actually, I'm self-abandoning right now and I need to check in with myself. I promise you, if you make that shift, you will crush all of your people-pleasing tendencies. That one thing right there in the beginning of this episode, and we have so much more to cover, that will crush all of your people-pleasing if you start doing it. Because when you say it that way, you go, oh, wait, I'm actually doing something that is not good for me. Wait. Self-abandonment. Stop calling it people-pleasing. It's not cute. It's not cute, and it makes you look ugly. Hey, bestie, just a quick little pause. Did you know I have a Patreon? If you love this podcast and my free content, Patreon is actually the best way to support it, and you get exclusive content that you're not going to find anywhere else. I am talking monthly tarot and astrology predictions, intimate behind-the-scenes vlogs, my masterclasses, my polls to help shape future content, and even a private Discord community. And the best part, there are over 500 100 posts waiting for you the moment that you join. There are multiple tiers, starting with a free tier just for hanging out with us, and a $2.22 tier for a tarot reading every single month, and higher tiers with even more perks like exclusive vlogs, masterclasses, and my top tier is actually $14.14, which includes everything, plus it gives me extra support for those of you that just really want to keep me creating. Honestly, Patreon is truly what keeps this podcast and all of my content going. So I would really love if you want to join and be a part of this amazing cozy community. Head to patreon.com/Chloe Taylor, join us and become a cozy babe today. All right, let's go ahead and get this Poppi. I feel like it's hard to crack the Poppi with the microphone like this, but I really like having a microphone that I hold. So we're just going to do our best. It's all right. There's a reason I don't buy this one. Hey there, Cozy Babe, and welcome back to the Cozy Babes Club podcast. I'm your host, Chloe Taylor, and as we've stated, today we're talking all about self-abandoning, why you shouldn't do it, and why it makes you ugly. And I'm hopefully in this episode going to convince you to stop doing this and to start living authentically. Because in order to have self-trust, live in accordance with your values, make real connections, and actually live a healthy life, this to me is at the foundation. You have to be willing to actually live as your true self. And so in this podcast, I want to start dismantling the parts of us that are not the true self and how to combat it. So today we're focusing specifically on self-abandonment. So what is self-abandonment and why do we do it? It's not just being nice or being considerate. It is actually manipulation at its core. We do it because we try to control how other people perceive us and our character. This is why at its core it's manipulation, because we're trying immediately to control how somebody sees us, which we can't do that anyways. Even if we wanted to, we can't. It is often something that is learned as a survival mechanism, and most people that consider themselves self-abandoners, they were parent pleasers first. So they learned early in life that in order to have love, affection, attention to, normal things that all children need, they learn really early on, if they do not act or behave in a certain way, that the parent, guardian, or somebody that had some kind of authority in their life would take away from them, would take away love, adoration, attention, and in some form, they would abandon them. This is where this usually forms. I'm not saying every time. I do think this is something that can be picked up later in life, but for the most of us that are self-abandoners, we learn to self-abandon really early on. And I'll give you an example from my own life, and I would encourage you while you listen to this to think about your own life. Think about where is the earliest memory that you have of doing this. So I'm going to share with you where I have my earliest memory. I do feel that it probably was something that was ingrained significantly younger. And I need to say that I am the youngest of 7 children. And in my household, I was considered the easy child. And that is a huge red flag, by the way. If you're a parent out there and you have a child that you coin as the easy child, it's a huge red flag, because most of the time, a child that is considered easy, they are the ones that don't actually self-express. They don't feel safe enough with you to self-express and knock heads with you. It is normal to have a child butt heads with you. Your children are literally an energetic mirror that show you where you need to grow. Do not have children unless you are ready to have a mirror held up to you like that. And in my family, my parents chose to have 7 when they definitely maybe shouldn't have had any. So I need to get that off my chest first, that I feel like I had this deeply ingrained because I grew up in a very aggressive and violent household where my father was extremely aggressive towards many of my siblings. In front of me, I witnessed so much physical aggression. And then you had my mother, who often would be more of the emotional aggressor, but she was also physical from time to time as well. And I just need to point that out because early in my development, I learned that I could not be myself and be loved, accepted, paid attention to. This is something that I think in modern psychology, we are learning more, but I just want to make that clear that I think my self-abandoning tendency probably came on extremely early. Like, I don't have memories of not doing it. I was also extremely religious growing up because that was something that both of my parents really celebrated in me. And so I didn't like deviate off of that until I was in my early 20s. And like, I'm just going to say it, Mormonism is a cult. Like, it's giving culty behavior, and I grew up Mormon and I was definitely in a cult. Okay. That has been an insane wild ride that we can talk about at another time. But my earliest memory of being a self-abandoner was, gosh, I couldn't even tell you how old I was. I know I had to have been at least like 12, 13, maybe, because I had a nephew that was born, I want to say in 2001, that I was very jealous of him. I can see that now. And I think it was a normal, like, it was a normal reaction to being the youngest child in my family and having a tight-knit relationship, especially with my mother, and then having another child come into the picture 9 years later and not receiving as much of that affection that I was used to. I think that's very normal in child development psychology. I was very jealous of him. I couldn't see it that way or call it that. I just knew that, you know, isn't that just the damnedest thing too? That when we see things like this in children or in people, we always blame the child instead of the parent not giving equal attention. Like, you know how, just like as a quick sidebar, you know how people will say to women like, oh, she has daddy issues, when like her dad literally did a shit job, and we don't say like, oh, like her dad abandoned her. We instead put it on her, and now suddenly she has daddy issues. I think this is the same. I don't think we should be telling kids, oh, you're just jealous. I think it should be actually, did that parent try to give as much of their attention in both directions? Were they doing a good job at like pivoting around that? And this is why I also feel like really big families, like, just from my own experience being the youngest of 7, big families should not exist. Like, nobody should be having that many kids. I honestly think like at most 4 is the absolute limit. And that to me is even crazy. Like, I don't think most people are ready to have that many personalities and be challenged that hard. I honestly think 3 is really the limit, but I feel like I get it. Like, some people want that rounded number. For myself, I think 2 would be the limit if I had any, but that's because I came from a big family and I don't want none of that. My earliest memory of self-abandoning was I was at a restaurant and me and my nephew had gotten into it. I'm sure it had something to do with my mom giving him more attention, or, you know, letting him sit somewhere that I wanted to sit. I'm sure there was some jealousy involved, okay? There was some, we need to come up with a better phrase for that, because like I just pointed out, I don't think it was jealousy. I think it was a normal reaction. But I got really upset, and my mom's sister was in town, or I don't know if we were on vacation or she was visiting. I don't remember. That's how long ago. But she like put her hands on my shoulders and tried to like soothe me, and I shrugged her off. And I was just like, don't touch me. And again, normal reaction. I had a boundary. Oh my God, this family doesn't know what to do with boundaries. I had a boundary, and I got laid into that night by my mother, who came at me and was like, you know, classic narcissistic tendency where the narcissist in question sees their children as an extension of themselves and like uses them like pawns. And that's basically what came out of the conversation, is that I was not allowed to disrespect my aunt like that, and she would not allow that. And I needed to go and apologize to my aunt right now. And I would not act like that because that made her look bad. And I remember, and this is like, I think it like sat with me. Like, this is one of those like, this is like one of my Roman empires where I like sometimes think about this moment because I couldn't understand it as a child. I didn't have the awareness that I have now, and now I do, and I can totally see how the whole situation was fucked up. But I went and I apologized with my mom standing next to me, my aunt across from me, and there was a lump in my throat. Like, Just picture that. You are like a 10-year-old, maybe 12-year-old child. You have this like lump building and building. Oh, sorry. You have this lump building in your throat. And it wasn't because I felt bad. It wasn't because I felt like there was an apology that was necessary. It was because I felt like I was dishonoring myself. And I was crying. I'm a Cancer Venus and a Cancer Mars. So like when I'm angry, I just cry. And I think that in the room, it was understood that I was crying because I felt bad, but I was crying because I was angry. I was crying because I was being made to do something. And I was told that if I didn't do it, there would be consequences. Like I was going to be punished in some way. I had to do this thing. And so I did. And I have never, like, I don't sit and like think about this and like get angry and seethe or anything like that. Like I'm not, it's whatever. It was a really long time ago. But it was something that impacted me so deeply that I really think that's where a lot of my like, I learned in that moment that there was no adult that was going to teach me to stand up for myself. There was no adult that was going to say, hey, it's okay for you to have a boundary. And the funny thing is, as an adult, if somebody touches you and you don't want to be touched, do we expect, like, think about that for just a second. You, as your full grown self right now, if somebody put their hands on you, wouldn't you tell them not to touch you if it was inappropriate? Like, we put the weirdest expectations on children. So weird. Anyways, that's my earliest memory of self-abandoning and doing it in a way that was truly to my own detriment. And I was angry and I was inside. I had all these angry feelings and I knew that it was wrong. I think that's really the core of what I'm trying to get to is I knew that it was wrong, but I couldn't understand why it was wrong. I was too young to really fully grasp that. And sadly, the adults in the room all thought this was okay. And also just for my own sanity, if any of my family members are listening to this episode, I feel like this is so real and I don't hear enough creators say it. If they wanted to be portrayed better in my content, they should have acted better. I feel like if I can just be your big sister from the internet real quick, if you have a story on your heart that you feel like you need to put words to and say out loud, and it would make somebody else that you know personally look bad, quote unquote, and you are self-abandoning and not sharing your story, if it makes them look bad, they should have acted better. Your story is still your story, and let us not self-abandon to not tell the story. So what's the ugly side of self-abandoning? The first thing is that you literally become a fucking shapeshifter, okay? You are like shape-shifting. One day you're this person, one day you're that person. You shapeshift to make other people comfortable instead of making yourself feel good. And the sad part about it is you will completely lose your authenticity this way. So many people don't know how to be their authentic selves, and it's because when you self-abandon, it's not that you lose that part of yourself, it just you start to not identify with it and it takes time to reel it back in. So you're setting yourself up for failure when you do it that way. I wouldn't even say failure, that's not the right word, but you set yourself up to have to do more work in the long run by shape-shifting constantly to make other people, like literally it is setting yourself on fire so that you will keep other people warm and comfortable. Like maybe you should just make people cry. Maybe you should just let people have their feelings. It also makes you resentful because like I stated earlier in the episode, for myself, when I was like, why do I feel like I just want a break from everyone in my life? It was because I was self-abandoning. I wasn't doing what I actually wanted to be doing. I was agreeing to plans. I was spending time where I didn't want to. I was constantly doing these things because I didn't want other people to think less of me. I didn't want other people to think I wasn't a good friend or I wasn't there for them when they might have needed me, when my cup was already empty, is what I'm like. That's what I'm getting at. And I think so many people that do self-abandon, a lot of y'all have an empty cup and you're trying to pour into other people, but the well is bone dry. The cup is dry, girl. Like there ain't nothing left in there. And so you're doing it now. The water that is filling your cup that you're pouring with is now resentment. And resentment breeds the worst kind of relationships because then you start to get mad about shit. Like, have you ever just seen a bitch, okay? Have you ever just seen a bitch and been like, look at that bitch over there? What does she think she is doing? Who does she think she is? She is now the bitch. Like, she just opened a bag of chips and now she is the bitch eating the chips. And now you're pissed. Like, it ruins the relationships that you have with people when you lead from resentment like that. You also lose your own self-confidence. You stop being confident in the things that you say, your actions, how you condone your entire life. You stop being true to yourself and your life shrinks down and becomes so much smaller. This is something that I 100% have been guilty of, okay? This is why I've made such an active choice in my life to make myself do things that make me uncomfortable, to make myself go out of my comfort zone to meet new people, to make myself date myself. We have an episode all about that as well. To make myself date myself, because at some point there was a tipping point and I'd lost all of my self-confidence. I no longer felt good and I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I was an amalgamation of all the things I could give to other people versus how was I actually filling myself back up. And I wasn't doing it. So I had no confidence. I need you to understand when I say I had no confidence, like, I feel like it was a slippery slope into mental unwellness because I got to a point where my life got so small, I felt like I couldn't even leave the house without being freaked out. I felt like I couldn't drive places. I couldn't meet people. I couldn't look people in the eye. I still struggle with that a little bit. And I do not have the tism, so do not try to diagnose me that way. I feel like there's a big obsession right now with everybody self-diagnosing. I have actually been to a mental health professional. I do not have autism. Looking in the eye, it's a totally different thing that I struggle with, and we can cover that in the future. That is like, I lost my confidence so bad. I felt like I couldn't even conduct myself in front of another person because I was so afraid. I wanted to hear what they had to say so that I could shapeshift, right? I could shapeshift and be the best person that they needed. You become an emotionally exhausting person when you self-abandon, because when you self-abandon, the people that are like securely attached, which is like all the people we would like to be attached to, right? If y'all want an episode on attachment theory, I would love to do a part 2 continuation of this talking about that, because I think that there is definitely a correlation between attachment theory and self-abandoning, like especially if you're an anxious attached person. But there's these different attachments that we form, and the theory is that like early on we didn't attach correctly to a parent, and so most of us are not securely attached, and being securely attached like creates the right foundation for like self-development. And anyways, you become an emotionally exhausting person because all the securely attached people that you would like to be friends with, they will avoid you like the plague, because you're not your authentic self. They can smell it a mile away. You don't stand for anything. You don't have any boundaries. You're someone that will constantly, like a chameleon. Like, I also think that like it's emotionally exhausting because if you're someone that operates that way, when somebody else has a boundary, you're gonna freak out. And it's going to cause disruption because you're now so like, oh my God, like I thought I was doing the right thing by pleasing you and abandoning myself, that suddenly it like makes a mess of all the good, healthy relationships that you would want to have because you're so concerned about how you appear to them. It's honestly a relationship killer. It will literally kill all of your relationships if it goes on long enough, because unless you want to be in relationships with people that don't grow also, because if it's like 2 people that do it, you're just constantly in this nonstop feedback loop of doing it with each other. And I'm just here to tell you that's not a healthy relationship. That's a trauma bond. You're now trauma bonding. I want to take a brief moment to talk about why I think this also impacts women more. Now, I know the bulk of my audience is women because I see my analytics. I see who watches me. Shout out to the like 2% of you that are male. Love you guys too. But this is something that women tend to have more of a problem with. And the reason I think this is we are literally societally conditioned to emotionally do the labor. We are all programmed to do emotional labor. We are supposed to be the emotional backbone. And we're praised for being agreeable, for being nurturing. And the second that we act like a man, we're called a bitch. We are told that we're not great, we're terrible, we're an asshole, we're being a bitch, we're being too much, we're being too emotional, right? We're told all of these insults. And women, I think inherently are also so terrified of being labeled selfish. And I need to make a whole episode on why you should be selfish, because girl, you need to enter your selfish era. Did I already do an episode on that, entering your selfish era? We need to do a part 2. Because just as another little side tangent, as a child, that was probably the number one insult that was hurled at me from at least the women in my family, specifically the older women, because again, 7 kids, there's like a whole generation in my family where in other families there isn't. Like I have siblings that could be my parents by age. But in any case, I was always told how selfish I was growing up constantly. And even like within the last 10 years, it has come up and I have like been like, well, we need to talk about that. Why do you say that? Just because I don't want to do what you want to do? Like, grow up, basically. And it was something that I was very afraid of. I didn't want to be called selfish, right? It was insulting. And I think women in general, all of us are afraid to be called selfish. And because you're afraid of that word, you will keep self-abandoning so you do not appear selfish or appear as the villain in somebody else's story. And the reality is, it's time to be selfish. It's if being selfish is you just meeting your needs and not self-abandoning, it's time to be selfish. So how do we actually break the cycle? Chloe Taylor, how did you break the cycle? How did you start taking control and leading from a place of having standards for your life that you now refuse to do that, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I think that I have my moments of feeling like I should self-abandon, but these are the things that I feel like ultimately have helped. And that's the guidance I want to give to you. So first and foremost, this is probably like the Band-Aid ripping off moment. You need to sit with the discomfort. And this is the hardest part, because the reason that we self-abandon is because it's uncomfortable to not. It's uncomfortable when we think that somebody is going to abandon us if we don't abandon ourselves first. It's uncomfortable, and you might even feel guilty. If you're somebody that in the past would constantly self-abandon and over-explain and always feel like you needed to be understood, it's scary. We might even feel guilty just saying the word no. Oh my God, a woman saying no. Who is she? Who does she think she is? How selfish. No, not selfish. You need to start sitting with those uncomfortable feelings. I myself have gone through this in my life, especially I would say heavily in the last like 18 months. I have had to sit in my own discomfort with family members, with just not doing things that would cause me to abandon. And interestingly enough, I feel like it's a lot of what society teaches us not to do. Like, for example, okay, real talk, bestie girl. If you're on a self-improvement journey and want to feel more confident, aligned, and unstoppable, I've got you. I have 3 courses designed to help you step into your most authentic and powerful self. First up, Authentically Aligned. This is my 4-week signature program to help you get unstuck, gain clarity, and create a life that actually feels right for you. If you've been feeling lost or like you're settling, this course will help you step into alignment. And just a heads up, the price is actually going up on this one, so grab it now for $55 with code ECLIPSE2024. Next, we have Vision Board to Destiny. This isn't just about making a Pinterest board and hoping for the best. This is a deep dive masterclass where I'll teach you the exact manifestation techniques that have worked for me. If you're struggling with making your dreams actually happen, this is the shift that you need. And finally, the Authentic Self Guidebook and Meditation, a beautiful introspective guide to help you uncover who you truly are and start living as the version of yourself daily. All of my courses come with workbooks, and most include videos to guide you every step of the way. If you're ready to do the inner work and step into the life you know is meant for you, go to chloetaylor.com and check them all out today. I promise you won't be disappointed, bestie. For example, if you're somebody that doesn't really talk to your parents, let's say, because they were mentally or physically abusive, and you know that calling them drudges up a lot of those feelings and they're never going to validate you. Society will tell you to just forgive them anyway. They're your parents. They won't be here forever. Be selfish. Sit with that discomfort. Sit with the discomfort of knowing other people are going to judge what you're doing. Sit with it. If you say no to something that you feel like everybody's going to come for you for not going, for like saying no to an event that you really don't want to go to, Sit with that. Sit with the discomfort. Sit with the discomfort of other people coming up to you and going, oh, we missed you. Wish you'd been there. Sit with it. Sit with those guilty feelings. If you don't want to answer the phone, let it ring. Nobody, like, we also have this idea in today's culture that if you get a text or a phone call, you need to respond right away. If it is not an emergency, and even if it was an emergency, and I have lived through that nightmare, okay? I have gotten a text message in the morning that my sister died. Like, I have lived through that reality. And I have to tell you, it wouldn't have mattered what time of day that text message reached me. There was nothing that was going to change that. And on top of that, you're not the ambulance. You are not emergency services. You don't need to make yourself available for these things and like live in a constant state of fear about it. Because yeah, emergencies are going to happen, and like goddess willing, you will be available to meet those. But if you're not, you're not. And it's okay to have a firm boundary around that. It's okay to not constantly prioritize the what ifs in life. And I think that's a big part of it too, is just like sitting with the uncomfortability of the what if. What if somebody thinks I'm a villain because I didn't show up to this thing? What if they do? What if they do? And the next thing I'm going to tell you to do is to start dating yourself. I have a whole episode where I talked about this, especially if you're a really anxious girly that needs to work on like getting out more. I think that episode will really help. I'll link it down below for you in the show notes, but start dating yourself, start taking yourself out, start prioritizing what you love. Because if you're somebody that has been self-abandoning for a long time, even down to like the smallest things, like your man asks you where you want to go to dinner and you always let him pick instead of having a choice, even down on that level, some of us really do lose that part of ourselves and we have to call it back. So doing dates with yourself, this could be going to a coffee shop, ordering a drink that you've never tried, and just like journaling at the coffee shop. You know, that is a date with yourself. And the only rule is that you can't bring anyone else. When you date yourself, you need to date yourself. And I would say that that's probably the hardest part, is like going and being like, oh my gosh, I gotta be here alone. Like, it's kind of scary, but you learn to like enjoy yourself again. And you trust me when I tell you, it sounds like it wouldn't really do much. You're going to learn so much about yourself in that process. And also I would say no social media. When you're on your own self date, you're not allowed to just sit and like doom scroll. You have to actually be with yourself. Practice saying no without over explaining. Oh my gosh, this one is so good. I'm kicking my feet because this is something that I have struggled with for years. And the funny thing is, when I've started to do it, I have seen a backlash. I have seen people make assumptions about me. I have seen people be like, you know, they kind of get this like energy about them, and you can tell that they're dissatisfied with your action or your words. But again, coming back to point number one, you have to sit with that discomfort. So what if they're disappointed? They're an adult. They can handle disappointment. Like I tell myself that like a mantra. When I am with someone that I would self-abandon for in the past, I will tell myself they're an adult, they can handle disappointment. Like if they're a child and they can't handle disappointment and they need help re-regulating, I will be there to help them re-regulate, even if what I said, even if no is still the answer. Like if it's a child, we can do things to help, but no is still the answer. So yeah, if they're an adult, they can handle the word no. And if they can't, it's not your responsibility to light yourself on fire to keep them comfortable. I also need you to recognize that you avoid the conflict to keep the peace. But when you avoid the conflict to keep the peace, what is that saying? It's you start a war inside yourself, right? Peace actually comes with authenticity. When you stay quiet to keep the peace, you are not your most authentic self. And now inside you're ruminating, you're building the resentment. Trust me, as somebody who chronically has done this in the past, I understand. I know you, I see you, I was you. And now coming out the other side, I feel like I have so much more confidence. I have so much more of a like command over my life. And I also feel like it keeps like the wrong friendships and family members and people out of my life that I don't want to have those strong ties with. It attracts the right people to me. But just recognize that by avoiding and choosing to self-abandon, you are just making your life harder in the long run. The freedom that comes from choosing authenticity instead of self-abandonment is, number one, you gain your confidence back because you're no longer living for the approval of someone else and hoping that they will validate you or choose you. You also find out who your real friends are over the ones that maybe you were trauma bonding with. Maybe you were people pleasing back and forth forever, right? Or maybe you start to assert yourself and gain your confidence and it kind of knocks that person out of your life, or those people or those family members or whoever out of your life. You learn very quickly the people that were just there to drink your well dry and the people that were there because they actually love the person that you are because they saw that authenticity, right? I also would say that when you get really good at this with practice, you really will start to care what people think less. And like, this to me is the secret sauce. If you really care what other people think always, this is the thing. It's removing the self-abandonment that will get you to the place of not caring, because you won't care how other people perceive you. You won't care if you share a story and the joke didn't land because you think you're funny. Like, you won't care if somebody doesn't get it because you get it. You know, you literally won't care. And I don't know how else to say it except for to say it like that. You will literally stop caring and it will feel like you took a magic pill. You'll be like, oh my God, am I the main character? Did my life just start lifing? What is happening? So that is like, you will literally stop caring and it will be the weirdest transformation, I promise, in a good way. It'll feel good weird. And I think the real kicker, if I haven't drilled it into you enough, is that the biggest plot twist is that self-abandoning just leads to more abandonment in the long run. Because real relationships are built on real honesty, real communication, sharing your needs, having boundaries within the relationship. And it's built on two people that actually show up as their full selves. So all of this to say, I encourage you to start calling it self-abandoning. And I want you to take notice and take stock in your life with where you self-abandon. Where does it happen in your life? Is it with people, situations, places? Why do you think you self-abandon? Really take a moment, like, don't leave this episode. Hit pause and really think about it for a second of where do you self-abandon in your life? And if you feel brave enough, share it in the comments. I would love to hear from you, cheer you on, support you. I also want to remind you that your authenticity is your superpower. You start being yourself and you will become magnetic. I also want to encourage y'all, if you want to continue the conversation, shoot me a DM on Instagram. Talk to me about it. I love responding to y'all in my DMs, talking about these things. If you have thoughts on the episode, I always want to hear it. You know what really helps me out more so than like the other things in this episode that I've covered, like my courses and such, is if you haven't reviewed the podcast, can you just leave me a review, especially on Apple? I feel like my reviews on Apple, when I do get them, they're often so mean. Like, people leave mean reviews on Apple and it's fine. I can take it, right? I've been a content creator for a long time, but if you have Apple Podcasts, can you please just go leave me a little review? If you feel like it, if you're feeling it, it would really helps me out. And no matter where you're listening, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, give it a review, a 5-star review on Spotify. All of it helps us to reach more people. And that's something that's totally free that like genuinely really helps. So I would definitely appreciate it. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, leave me a little review. And I also just want to say that you deserve to be seen as your real self, not just the version of yourself that keeps everybody else comfortable. And of course, if you didn't already hear it today, make sure you follow your plan and not your mood. That's your sign. I'm not letting you forget. Follow your plan and not your mood. All right. I love you so much, Cozy Babe, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.